Hi guys, so today I'm going to start on stats. I know a lot of you guys are probably getting ready for midterms and stuff for statistics if you're in college and university. So I'm going to start with some of the basics and work up from there. So first, I'm going to look at the mean and standard deviation. So first, I will give you a set of numbers and ask you to find the mean and the standard deviation. So, for example, if you have a sample that you take for a soil sample and you look for zinc and you find out that in milligrams per gram of zinc you have 0.1, 0.2, 0.25, 0.15, and 0.1. Okay? Now, what you want to do is you want to find your mean and your standard deviation. Okay? So mean is fairly easy. Mean is just finding the average. So you add up each of these numbers and you divide by the total number of numbers you have. So I'll write the equation as the sum, which is big sigma, of samples divided by the number of samples. So let me run through this example here. So if I were to add all of these, it would be 0.1 plus 0.2 plus 0.25 plus 0.15 plus 0.1. And now you'd count these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 samples, so you divide by 5. And when you do this, I'll just get my calculator. Okay, so 0.1 plus 0.2 plus 0.25 plus 0.15 plus 0.1 will give me, if I hit equals, 0.8. That is my sum of my quantities of zinc that I got from each sample. And then I divide it by 5. So when I take that, I divide by 5, and I get 0.16 as my mean. And that's milligrams per gram zinc. Now, standard deviation, this is a longer sort of calculation, but what you do is it's the sum of your y values minus your mean squared divided by n minus 1 all square rooted. So you just found your mean. So in this case, mu stands for my mean. N is the number of samples. So what you do is you'd find this squared value for each of these samples and add them all up. And once you do that, you divide it by what your n minus 1 is, and then you plug it into the equation and you get your standard deviation. So let's quickly go through this one. So I'll do my standard deviation down here since I'm going to need a lot of space. And then I'll probably give you guys some really easy ways of doing these calculations on your calculator without having to punch in all of these numbers. So let's start. So my first quantity, my y would equal 0.1. So to get my y minus mu squared for this one, it would be 0.1 minus what my mu was is 0.16. So it'll be 0.1 minus 0.16 squared, which would be 0.1 minus 0.16 squared, which is 0.0036. You probably noticed that this subtraction here gives you a negative number, but that's okay, since when you square a negative number you always get a positive number. So that's my first one. So my second one, my second y is 0.2. My mu is 0.16 again. So that'll be 0.2 minus 0.16 squared equals 0.0016. Do the same thing for the third, fourth, and fifth. So I'll just keep going from here. And mu will stay constant for all of these. Since my number 1 and my number 5 are the same, the calculation would be the same, so I'll just put a 5 here as well. That'll just make it easier than having to do the whole calculation all over again. So now that you have all these calculations done, now you just have to add all of these up, remembering to double this one since 1 and 5 would have the same number. So I'll just get another piece of paper. So remember, standard deviation is the sum of each of those individual calculations that we just did divided by n minus 1, all square rooted. Okay, so remember, that's your equation for standard deviation. So now, back to the first page. Remember, just add all of these numbers up, remembering to double this one just because it was 2 calculations with the same value, and you get your standard deviation. So I'll just do that quickly now. And if you recall, I had 5 values for n, so it'll just be 5 minus 1, which is 4, but so as for my top before I square root, it will be 0.0036 plus 0.0016 plus 0.0081 plus 0.0001 plus 0.0036 again. So my top comes out to be 0.017. And then I take that value, divide it by 4, because that's what n minus 1 was, and it comes to 0.00425. But remember, I still have to square root that value. And once I square root it, I get this value, which is 0.016. And that is your standard deviation. So what does the standard deviation mean? This means that if you were to take this value and square it, that would give you your r squared value, which is the deviation that if you were to draw this on a line, you would have a deviation of 1.6% from having a straight line. And that, my friends, is how you find mean and standard deviation. Subscribe to me so you guys can see some cool videos doing science and experiments and maybe learning something new. Thanks!